Hello, we are here for our last teaching tip in our series about listening comprehension. And our last tip is related to how to check in on students, how to find out if students are getting it, understanding you. So our first tip today is to start with a friendly atmosphere. You might say, I am friendly. What do you mean? I'm just reminding us all that Indian culture tends to be very relational. There's a strong importance attached to developing relationships before you do business, before you feel confidence in another person. Excuse me, I'm talking about Indian culture. Do you think what I said is fair?
Is not it universal to everywhere?
Well, yes it is, but in Canadian culture, we sometimes are far more transactional. We'll be a little bit friendly and then we want to get right down to business. So if our professors are trying to understand their students a little bit better and they want to know how to make students from India feel more at home, what suggestions would you give them?
I would say that before starting their lecture or before starting their teaching, they should always tell the student that if you are having any difficulty to understand my accent, my words or my sentence or anything regarding content or what I am teaching you at present or what I am going to teach you now, you feel free to ask and don't feel any hesitation and don't be scared to ask any question, whatever is arising in your mind. So I think that is a thing that if the teacher tells a student that please don't hesitate, or whatever is coming in your mind regarding, it may be anything, like if you are having difficulty to understand any word, feel free to ask, so what is the meaning of these things, or could you please tell me the synonymous of that particular word. Actually this word is completely unknown to me. Because what happens, the same object we call here something else here in Canada, and the same object we call something else in India. So it's a bit difficult sometimes to understand what the actual meaning of that thing. And also I want to say that what happens that Indian English is, Canadian English is different. It's different than what we always speak in our home country. So after coming from India here, when the student first time they listen their Canadian accent, so it's a bit difficult to understand sometimes to what actually they want to tell, what actually they want to convey in their mother tongue. So I think that is the one thing the student face, the accent. And what happens sometimes, I observe that their pace of study is a bit fast. So what happens when we are hearing that thing, the lectures, so we sometimes it happens that we skip something, we face difficulty to understand the content. So if the teacher before starting any class tells these things, so I think that will be very much helpful to understand the whole thing.
Okay.
And the student will feel comfortable.
Okay.
Because what happens many times I observe, and sometimes it happened to me when I came first the September 4th, when I started my class the first week of September, that I used to feel scared. And I used to feel shy sometimes and kind of be a bit hesitation that just to ask something. But now I'm a bit comfortable, but in the beginning it was a bit difficult for me.
Okay. So do you have any other tips? Invite questions. Do you have any other suggestions to help students feel more comfortable?
Yeah, and another thing I think it could be a great help for students to feel comfortable. That is, if the teacher is a bit friendly, then it will the student will feel more comfortable. They will feel more like at home. For example, if the student sometimes asks the teacher asks student that anything that is beyond study, like regarding anything big festival. For example, For example, within next week Diwali is there. Diwali is a very big festival in India, and so we celebrate it in a different way in India. So if the teacher comes and if they ask something that how do you celebrate Diwali, and this time you are away from your home country, so how you are going to plan to celebrate here in Canada, in Brantford. So this type of question if the if the teacher asks, so we feel a bit happy. we don't like to study all the time, and all the time we don't really like to study. So if the students sometimes ask something that is beyond study, something that is more humorous, that is more fun kind of thing, then we feel very attached to that teacher, and we feel very happy, and we feel very comfortable with talking. And also I think it helps student to get more interested in the class.
All right.
We feel interested, so we don't feel to bunk class or to miss class.
All
That
right.
teacher, we get more interest on
right.
that teacher particularly.
All right,
I
thank
think,
you, Susmita.
yeah.
So friendliness, and Susmita has given us a couple of concrete tips for how to help students feel more at home in class so that they will ask and answer questions. My second tip then is to ask different kinds of questions. So if you ask students, did you understand? They are most likely going to say, yes, we did, whether they understood or not. So what you can do is ask comprehension questions. In other words, ask questions about what you said that they'll only be able to answer if they understood you. Or maybe you'll ask their opinion about what you just told them. You can also ask them to evaluate or analyze what they just heard. So if you ask questions that help students talk about what they heard, you're going to find out if they understood, if they're able to answer your questions. Last tip, what to do if you're worried about silence. If you're worried that students aren't going to answer, or if students aren't answering your questions. I have two sub-tips for this one. Number one, start with concrete questions. Start with a question that's going to be easy for students to answer, because what you're doing then is building their confidence and starting with something where they can have success, and then maybe they'll be a little bit more eager or willing to answer the next questions. Another tip is to actually let them answer in groups. So if you ask an analysis question or a what-if question, you might say, all right, here's my question, talk to your partner or talk to your table, decide on an answer, and then one of you can share it with me. If you do it that way, then they're going to build confidence, they're going to check whether or not their answer was right, and they're going to practice how they're going to say it, and it's going to be easier for them to participate. So there you have it. Be friendly, invite questions, and maybe talk a little bit about what's going on outside of class. Do ask different kinds of questions in order to generate the kinds of answers that will let you know whether students understood you. And use techniques such as building the questions from concrete to more challenging, or letting students talk in groups before they answer. And that should help you to understand better where your students are at in the class.